The second in this short series, the Summah Republic. Like Asavir, it lies far to the west of the empire. It's the cleric in the adventuring party of the great foreign nations. Its theme is religious zeal, its visual influence is Central and Southern America, its language family is what Wikipedia labels North Germanic, which we might call Scandinavian, Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, among others. Sumaah is a world power, an ambitious, proud, vibrant nation that is guided at all levels by a fervent belief in the teachings of the Way. Their ultimate goal is to convert every human to the Way and to stamp out all spiritual beliefs that they consider counter to Doctrine. They've been at war with their neighbours for centuries, slowly but surely expanding their republic through conquest. Their absolute commitment to the Way is perhaps the biggest source of friction between the Summah Republic and the Empire. Nothing divides two people like a shared religion. Before I get into recent history, I'm going to give you a short overview of the nation, then we'll get to what all of this means in the field. The land of Sumaah is hot and steamy, full of jungles and dinosaurs, grand temples and sprawling pyramid cities. Long ago, it was ruled by despotic kings, supported by selfish and idolatrous priests, and propped up by the satraps of the Asavian archipelago. Yet hidden beneath the surface were the seeds of rebellion. Visitors from what would become the Empire found hints of a philosophy very similar to that which underlay their own understanding of the Way. And by sharing their own insights with the unhappy populace, they ignited a revolution that saw the kings torn down, the idolatrous temples destroyed, and the satraps sent fleeing back to Asavia with their tails between their legs. Sick of the excesses of their corrupt leaders, the people enthusiastically embraced the teachings of the Way. Their shared faith led to close ties between Sumaah and the nations at the Bay of Katazar, and eventually with the Empire, at least at first. The folk of the faraway nation had no interest in joining the Empire, and so were denied a place in the Imperial Synod, not that they really wanted one. Interpretations of ambition and pride taught the Sumaah that looking outside their borders for political or spiritual guidance would be unvirtuous. This all came to a head in the reign of Empress Ania. The Republic broke away from the Imperial Synod and excommunicated not only the throne, but all the priests of the Empire. For the next 200 years, the Republic was technically at war with the Empire, but the vast distances involved meant that military conflict was effectively impossible. In the reign of Empress Marika, the conflict between Sumaah and the Empire was resolved, and trade once again flourished. By that time, the Sumaah had established their own houses of virtue, which they considered to be equal in power to the assemblies of the Imperial Synod. The Synod, needless to say, disagreed. But as long as discussions were kept away from religious matters, relations between the two nations remained cordial. The Summah Republic is led by the House of the People, which meets in the grand capital of Timoj. The representatives are elected by the population and rule on behalf of the electorate. In practice, however, Sumaah is a theocracy. The Prasa of the Way have an unlimited ability to veto the decisions of the House of the People in the name of virtue, and regularly advise the representatives as to the most virtuous courses of action to follow. The influence of the Houses of Virtue is everywhere. While the government creates the law, it is enforced by the religiously appointed censors under the guidance of the House of Vigilance. The armies are effectively led by the House of Courage, while the House of Wisdom is responsible for educating the young and ensuring all written works are truthful. The House of Loyalty ensures that all elections are scrupulously honest and that all representatives are truly reflecting the wishes of the people who appointed them, while the House of Ambition works tirelessly to help citizens achieve their greatest potential in service to the nation. And the House of Prosperity ensures that not only are all citizens clothed, housed and well fed, but that trade within Sumaah and without is conducted in as virtuous a manner as possible. Finally, the House of Pride enacts foreign policy, a role that includes orchestrating the strategies for the nation's crusades against the unbelief in nations that surround them. Imperial scholars believe that over the last 4 centuries, the Sumaah have completely absorbed as many as 5 smaller human nations, converting them to the Way and making them part of the Republic, whether they liked it or not. The one nation they cannot defeat, however, is the one they would most like to bring down, the Asavian archipelago. The Sumaah despise the Asavians, both for historic wrongs done to their people when the Asavians controlled their nation, and because everything about their society infuriates and angers the Sumaah. They are heretical, blasphemous, idolatrous tyrants, in the words of the Sumaah themselves. Whilst it's easy to dismiss the Summah Republic as being a fascist theocracy, it is a little more subtle than that. The Prasta seem to be motivated by a genuine concern for the spiritual well-being of their people, and priests who abuse their powers face extremely harsh punishments by their peers. While they appear dour when they visit the Empire, at home they are exuberant and passionate as the people of the Brass Coast, as fascinated by learning as the Urizen, and as proud of their nation and their people as the most glorious Dornish troubadour. The Sumaah follow the Way, and it is the only philosophy tolerated in their nation. They share the same doctrines and virtues as the Empire, but where they are distinct is in their absolute intolerance of heresy and blasphemy. Having decided the Way is correct, they have come to the conclusion that all other beliefs must logically be incorrect. Worse, that they are dangerous distractions from the virtuous life that all humans should follow if they wish to transcend the labyrinth. The Summah Synod, the Houses of Virtue, is much more powerful and influential than the Imperial Synod, especially the House of the Way, which possesses many of the qualities the Empire would associate with the General Assembly. It is often surprising to imperial visitors that legal powers which in the Empire would rest with the Military Council, Conclave, Bourse, or even Senate, instead rest with one of the Houses of Virtue. There are no national assemblies. Sumaah is a single vast sprawling nation. The closest one gets to a national assembly are the small regional gatherings of priests who discuss judgments and hear criminal cases and the like, all under the auspices of the Houses of Virtue. The Republic is the largest producer of Liao outside of the Empire, although the recipe they use differs somewhat from that familiar to their imperial counterparts. Venum does not grow well in the steaming jungles of Sumaah, and their Liao is created from an entirely different plant more suited to the tropical climate, but it is functionally identical in all other respects to that used by imperial priests. The Sumaah sell their surplus Liao to visiting merchants, not only from the Empire, but also from the Commonwealth, Sarkafan Republic, and even from Jarm, although the merchants of that latter nation must now look elsewhere for their Liao, following the Sumaah embrace of the Liberty Pact and the imposition of an embargo against all merchants hailing from the eastern nation. At the end of 379 YE, the Summah Republic declared war on the Empire after a little over a century of relative peace. They denounced the Imperial Synod as a den of heretics, exiled Imperial citizens in Sumaah lands, and closed the port of Zemet to Imperial traders. One of the main reasons given was repeated insults to the pride of the Sumaah people, especially with regard to the slow progress on an embassy to their nation. Other factors most likely included the, at the time, reasonably good relations with their enemies, the Asavian Archipelago, a number of miscommunications around matters of religion, and the Imperial Synod's recognition of the first non-human exemplar. As with the previous war, the conflict was not military in nature. Rather, the Sumaah sent missionaries to other nations where followers of the Way were to be found, denouncing the Imperial Synod as having lost the Way at every turn and creating diplomatic difficulties wherever they could. The Empire, for its part, did not make a declaration of war of its own, which predictively served to make the Sumaah even more angry. In autumn 380 YE, the situation became even more complicated. The imperial crown, a symbol of imperial pride and ambition that had been worn by every throne since Giovanni, was removed from the empire by one Guillermo de Tessato of the Printers Guild and taken to Sumaah, apparently for safekeeping. As a consequence, Imperatrix Elisabetta became the first throne in history not to wear the imperial crown. The Empire, for its part, largely dismissed the matter of the crown, at least in public, which predictably made the Sumaah even more angry. Then, with little fanfare, the Sumaah declared an end to the war during the summer solstice of 382 YE, following a steady increase in diplomatic relations. They set in motion plans to reopen Zemet to imperial traders and sent diplomats to inhabit the Sumaah embassy in the necropolis. However, that is not to say that they had changed their minds about the Imperial Synod. Far from it. Rather, they continued to claim that the priests of the Empire lacked the courage of their convictions, that they had sacrificed their spiritual mandate in the service of expediency and selfish political gain. They urged pilgrims across the known world to look to the Houses of Virtue, not the Imperial Synod, for guidance. They even went so far as to send Sumaah missionaries to the Empire to openly preach the idea that it is Timoj, not Bastion, that is the true heart of the faith. Furthermore, the Sumaah still have the imperial crown, and show no signs of returning it any time soon, claiming they will do so only once the Empire has demonstrated a true commitment to the virtues and doctrines of the Way. During the summer solstice, 382 YE, at the same time as they were delivering the news that the Sumaah had ended their war with the Empire, the emissaries of the Republic excommunicated the imperial ambassador to Axos, Tarquinius of Ancarian. Not only did they announce a writ of excommunication publicly, they then proceeded to enact the Liao ceremony of the same name, spilling a significant amount of rich purple Liao over the floor of the Senate building, before continuing with their formal delegation. Whatever reasons the Houses of Virtue may have had for taking such a bold step are not common knowledge. Regardless, the Imperial Synod eventually vindicated Tarquinius and repaired the damage done to his soul. Still, this incident serves as a demonstration of the growing chasm between Timoj and Bastion. The Synod has condemned their Sumaah counterparts for using a writ of excommunication in this fashion, but for their part, the Houses of Virtue appear to have simply ignored their criticism. In some ways, peace with the Sumaah was barely distinguishable from war with the Sumaah. However, everything changed in the winter of 382 YE when, along with the Empire, the Commonwealth and the citadels of Axos, the Sumaah signed the Liberty Pact. The pact created an alliance between the signatories dedicated to the destruction of the institution of slavery throughout the known world. It also required sanctions against nations identified as slavers, but the Sumaah went further, placing full embargoes on trade with any nation that keeps slave, including Asavia, Jarm and presumably smaller nations such as the Iron Confederacy. But there was one problem with the Liberty Pact for the Sumaah, and that was what it had to say about the Orcs. For the last 50 years or so, one of the key problems the Summah Republic has had with the Empire has been their treatment of non-humans. Historically, the Sumaah simply killed any non-humans they came into contact with. They did not practice slavery, but they also believed that non-human creatures were a threat to human destiny. Following the Orc Rebellion, the Empire allowed the Imperial Orc nation to be formed and treated its members as equal citizens. The Sumaah might have been able to tolerate that. After all, they tolerate the Commonwealth, which also has Orc citizens, but then the Commonwealth does not claim to follow the way. The problem is all tangled up with the doctrines of reincarnation and human destiny, and with the definition of idolatry. The Sumaah claim that by allowing Orcs to be pilgrims of the way, to be priests and cardinals, and to hold imperial titles that give them authority over human citizens, the Empire is committing idolatry. They are exalting non-human creatures above human creatures. The final straw came in early 379 YE, when the Synod recognised an Orc as an exemplar of ambition, the former slave Thrace, the leader of the Orc Rebellion. It is probably no coincidence that the Sumaah declared war on the Empire a mere 6 months later. Then, Bonewar Wreck and Bonewar Cole made everything worse, or perhaps better, by successfully convincing the Imperial Synod to recognise the spiritual nature of Orcs and to adopt the doctrines of the Ancestor and the Howling Abyss. For the first time, Sumaah and Imperial doctrine was completely out of step, and the cause was the Empire's continued exaltation of non-human people. The Sumaah response was unexpected. They sent one of their praster to Anvil to bring Bonewar Wreck and Bonewar Cole to the Inquisition. A month later, the Houses of Sumaah recognised that there was virtue in the two Orcs, although they did not accept the two new doctrines. Since then, the Orc question has continued to vex the Sumaah and cause friction with the Empire. The situation has been exacerbated by the Liberty Pact, which effectively puts Orcs on the same level as humans, at least as far as slavery is concerned. For the Sumaah, this only makes sense if one views Orcs as being capable of being virtuous in the same way as humans can. If Orcs are genuinely capable of virtue, does this mean they can be part of the Way or not? If they can be part of the Way, then the Sumaah will presumably need to offer the same opportunities to convert to the true faith that are offered to their human enemies, which means they have to be able to recognise Orcs as citizens of their republic, which seems at odds with the idea that humans are the greatest beings in creation. Today, the houses, both of virtue and of the people, remain divided. Visitors, such as Bonewar Wreck, now living in Sumaah, or Imperial Orc traders, are accorded a modicum of respect, but they are not allowed to preach or undertake any priestly duties. The Sumaah still refute the existence of Orc exemplars and paragons, but they've at least laid out the roots of their problem to their fellows in the Empire. And to be honest, it is clear that some of the same concerns that are vexing the Sumaah are being discussed in some parts of the Empire as well. Finally, we come to the big one. I said at the start that nothing divides Sumaah and the Empire like their shared religion, and over the last couple of years that has become more and more obvious, and now a crisis point has been reached. When the Sumaah sent their missionaries to the Empire, it brought the friction between the two nations to a head. After much debate, at the end of last year, the Imperial Synod supported Jorma Steelhail of Wintermark in enacting a mandate that urged the citizens of the Empire and the Republic alike to seek common ground and focus on their shared ambition of spreading the Way to the world. In response to this mandate, the Houses of Virtue resolved that it would recognise no changes of doctrine and no new paragons or exemplars until the conflict with the Empire had been resolved, or at least for the next year, whichever came first. The Empire followed suit. Both nations committed to the idea of a symposium to at least discuss whether there was some basis for a shared understanding of the faith, or whether it was time for the Sumaah and imperial priesthoods to go their separate ways. One of the first things the Sumaah did was lay out what they saw as the 5 fundamental issues separating the two faiths. Their first complaint is that the Empire enacts changes of doctrine without considering the opinions of other priests of the way. If Timoj and Bastion are to be considered equals, then neither the Sumaah nor the Empire may unilaterally decide to change the basic foundation of their shared faith, the doctrines. This has been reflected most recently, they say, in the 2 new doctrines the Imperial Synod recognised, Ancestors and Howling Abyss. While they agree the doctrines appear sound in isolation, they claim that the Empire has failed to properly consider the wider implications. It is not clear whether the Sumaah mean that doctrinal changes should be discussed by both the Imperial Synod and the Houses of Virtue, or whether they are in fact arguing that every priest of the way, regardless of where in the world they live, should have a say. Their second concern is that the Empire appears to lack commitment to the idea that the way is the only true faith. The Empire, they claim, compromises constantly with false religions, tolerates those who espouse false virtues, and appears extremely inconsistent in their treatment of malign spiritual powers. The Sumaah accept that understanding of virtue and the human spirit is incomplete, and that the faithful should strive constantly to improve that understanding, but without a commitment to orthodoxy, they say, there can be no concord. What the Empire and Sumaah allegedly share is a common understanding of doctrine and a commitment to it, without which there is nothing to discuss. This seems to be at the heart of their accusations that the Synod has abandoned true virtue in pursuit of political convenience. Being too tolerant of false religions is an accusation that has been thrown around by the Sumaah before. They refused to attend the Symposium of Revelation in 380 YE, for example, because the Empire allowed priests and followers of religions other than the way to attend. But it also has political implications. Imperial toleration of the Assavian gods and the existence of the Temple of Baal and the Black Bull in Feroz are a clear bone of contention with the Praster of Sumaah, which will need to be addressed if any concord is to be achieved. Their third concern revolves around a difference in opinion as to the importance of paragons and exemplars. While some are known in both nations, Tian, Kol, Atun, Zemrus and the like, others are unique to the Republic, and many imperial paragons and exemplars are not recognised in Sumaah at all. The Empire does not have an exhaustive list of Sumaah paragons and exemplars, but is believed that there are far fewer of these inspirational figures than are familiar to imperial priests. In Sumaah, a significant emphasis is placed on the role of paragons and exemplars as figures who not only inspire pilgrims, but also as guides to help the faithful to make virtuous decisions. Exhaustive investigation of all potential inspirations is undertaken, and those who do not meet the highest standards are not recognised by the Houses of Virtue. The recognition of not one but 2 Orcs as exemplars, before the question of whether this is idolatry or not has been entirely resolved, is just one example of the conflict between the Sumaah and imperial attitudes. The Sumaah also appear critical of the sheer number of inspirations, and seem to harbour a perhaps understandable suspicion that the Empire is as influenced by politics as by virtue when it comes to recognising a new exemplar or paragon. If the Sumaah and the Empire are to be equal, then the role of inspirational figures in the way must be discussed and settled once and for all. The fourth claim is that the Sumaah and the Empire have diverged in their understanding of the virtues. In particular, the Sumaah seem concerned that imperial priests insist on attempting to tell the faithful who they should be loyal to, or chastise them for insufficient loyalty when they act in a way the priest does not approve of. The Imperial Loyalty Assembly has recently taken steps of its own to reiterate its understanding of this virtue and its commitment to the idea that loyalty comes from within rather than being something that is imposed from without. There are surely other ways in which Sumaah and imperial understanding of the virtues differ, each of which must be addressed if a satisfactory conclusion is to be reached. Finally, as mentioned before, the role of the Orcs in the way must be resolved. The Empire has allowed them to lead congregations, even going so far as to recognise one as cardinal. Yet their own doctrines, the doctrine of the Howling Abyss and the doctrine of the Ancestors, recognise that Orc souls are entirely different from human souls. By exalting Orcs, by putting them in a position of authority over humans, then by strict reading of doctrine, the Empire has been guilty of idolatry for the last 50 years. The Orc question must be answered satisfactorily if Jorma Steelhale's call for understanding is to have any hope of success. The Empire has moved in concert with the Sumaah towards a symposium during the coming winter solstice. In it, they will address the relationship between Timur and Bastion, between the priests of Sumaah and their imperial counterparts, once and for all. It's difficult to say what the outcome will be, but it seems clear that something must change. The two nations cannot continue as they are now. With both being in the Liberty Pact, it is to be hoped that some accord may be reached. That's Sumaah then. A nation far too ambitious, wise, courageous, vigilant, prosperous, loyal, and above all proud to ever really get along with the Empire. I hope you found this video useful and that I've not missed anything too obvious. You can find further details of everything I've mentioned here on the main Empire wiki. A good place to start is any Wind of Fortune tagged trade winds, and scroll down until you find the section headed Summah Republic. Next time, I'll be covering the Sarkophan Delves, the nicest, ruthless capitalists you could ever hope to meet. Until then, go with virtue.